People think marriages end with screaming, or betrayal, or someone walking out the door. Ours ended with one sentence. He said, "I'm tired," and I said, "I'm tired too." The room went silent, but not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like the world has stopped breathing. I didn't know then that I'd just started the fight that would end us. They say the smallest moments can change everything, but no one tells you how quiet that change sounds when it happens. For me, it started with 5 words. "I'm tired," and then I said it too. "I'm tired too." It was supposed to be empathy, but somehow, it became the spark that lit the fuse. That night, I realized love doesn't always end with a fight. Sometimes it dies in silence, between 2 people too exhausted to understand each other. It was past midnight when Mark said it. The baby monitor glowed faintly on the dresser, humming with static. Emma had finally fallen asleep after what felt like hours of crying. My body ached, my wrists sore from rocking, my head pounding from another caffeine-fueled day. When Mark sighed and said, "I'm tired," it sounded more like surrender than exhaustion. And maybe I should have just nodded, stayed quiet, let the air between us stay fragile but untouched. Instead, I said it too. "Oh, I'm tired too." He looked at me not in the way he used to, not with concern or warmth, just irritation. His eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. "Of course you are," he muttered, rolling his eyes like I'd just made it about me. I froze, not understanding what I did wrong. "I just meant," I started, but he cut me off, waving his hand. "You don't have to comment on everything, Sarah. Can't you just let me speak?" The words hit harder than they should have. I felt like I'd just walked into a minefield I didn't know existed. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "I'm sorry," I whispered, because that's what I always said when I didn't know how else to fix something. "I didn't mean you always do that," he interrupted, shaking his head. "You turn everything into your own little version." It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that, but this time, it felt different, colder, like something inside him had snapped quietly weeks ago. And I was only now hearing the echo. The baby monitor cracked softly with static, filling the silence between us. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to remind him we were on the same side. But he'd already turned away, his shoulders stiff, his focus gone. I stood there, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. "I wasn't trying to make it about me," I said softly. "I just meant, I understand. I'm tired too. That's all." He didn't respond. Just grabbed his phone, scrolled for a few seconds, then muttered something under his breath that I couldn't catch. I thought about saying good night, but he'd already walked past me toward the hallway. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty doorway. I could still hear the faint sound of his footsteps creaking down the stairs. I wanted to follow him, apologize again, fix it somehow, but I didn't even know what I was apologizing for anymore. That was the worst part. When love starts to fade, it doesn't scream. It just drains you. Like someone's unplugged your soul and left you running on echoes. I finally crawled into bed, pulled the blanket to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. The shadows from the nightlight made the walls look alive, twisting, breathing. I told myself he'd come back up soon, that we'd laugh about it tomorrow, that this was just exhaustion talking. But deep down, somewhere I didn't want to admit, I knew something had shifted. Something we wouldn't be able to name until it was too late. Downstairs, I could hear the faint click of the refrigerator door, then the slow drag of footsteps across the kitchen floor, a cabinet opening, a glass being set on the counter, the kind of everyday sounds that used to make me feel safe. But that night, they didn't sound safe at all. They sounded final. I don't know how long I lay there before sleep finally pulled me under. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. All I remember is the silence. The heavy, suffocating kind that feels like the calm before something breaks. And when I woke up the next morning, he was gone. The morning after felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. The air was too still, too quiet. That kind of silence that doesn't belong in a house with a baby. I turned toward his side of the bed and felt the emptiness instantly. The sheets were cold. No indentation where he usually slept. His pillow still perfectly fluffed. For a second, I told myself he must have gone downstairs early, maybe making coffee, maybe thinking about last night's stupid argument. But the longer I stared at the empty space, the more it began to feel like a wound. I got up, my legs shaky, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. The floor creaked under my feet as I stepped into the hallway. The faint hum of the baby monitor filled the silence. Emma was still asleep. Normally, Mark would have checked on her first thing. He loved that part of the morning, lifting her from the crib, whispering "Good morning, sunshine," like she could already understand him. But not today. Downstairs, the kitchen light was on. The smell of burnt toast hit me before I even reached the bottom step. The coffee pot was half full, the burner still on. His mug sat beside it, untouched, black coffee gone cold. The newspaper was folded neatly, like he'd planned to read it. His phone was on the counter, screen dark, face down. That's when the panic started creeping in, slow, quiet, crawling up my spine like a whisper. He never left without his phone. I called out his name once softly. "Mark?" Nothing. Again, louder. "Mark?" Still nothing. The house didn't answer. I walked into the living room, couch empty, TV off, no shoes by the door. Then I saw it. The front door was cracked open, just slightly, enough to let the cold air slip in and touch the floor. I froze. It wasn't like him to leave it open. Not at night, not ever. I waited, listening for any sound outside, a car, footsteps, the wind. Nothing, only silence. The kind that hums in your ears until you start hearing your own heartbeat. I stepped outside barefoot, the cold concrete stinging against my skin. The driveway was empty. His car was gone. I stood there for a long time, just staring at that empty space. Like maybe if I looked long enough, he'd pull back in. But he didn't. He didn't come back. I went back inside and picked up his phone. 10 missed notifications, mostly spam. One from his sister, one from his boss. No texts to me. No draft messages. I opened the kitchen drawer. His wallet was gone. Keys missing. No note. No sign of where he went. Emma started crying upstairs, and that sound, that sharp, desperate cry, snapped me back into motion. I went to her, holding her close, rocking her gently while my brain kept repeating the same question. Where did he go? The hours that followed were a blur. I tried calling him, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Are you okay? Please call me. I'm worried." Nothing. By noon, I'd checked every place he could have been: the garage, the backyard, even the basement. Everything looked normal to normal, like he'd just evaporated from the middle of an ordinary day. I stood by the sink, staring out the window, while holding Emma in one arm. The sunlight hit the counter in that harsh, clinical way, to bright to sharp. And that's when I saw it. His wedding ring, sitting in the sink, not on the counter, not in a drawer, in the sink, as if he'd taken it off while washing his hands and just left it there. I picked it up carefully, afraid to even touch it, like it might burn. The metal was cold, heavy, too symbolic for something that small. I placed it on the counter next to the baby bottle and just stared at it until I couldn't tell if the tears in my eyes were from exhaustion or fear. That's when I called his sister, Lauren. She sounded half asleep when she answered. "Sarah? Hey, what's going on?" "Mark's gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know." There was a pause on the line. "Did you two fight again?" The way she said again stung more than I expected. I wanted to say no, that it wasn't like that it was just a misunderstanding, but even to me, it sounded weak. "It wasn't a fight," I said quietly. "He just left." She hesitated. Maybe he needed space. Without his phone? Maybe he just forgot it. I looked at the counter, at the cold coffee, at the open door, at the empty driveway. He didn't forget. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every distant car outside, every whisper of wind sounded like him coming home. I left the porch light on. I sat by the window with Emma's baby monitor in my lap, the static a soft reminder that at least one heartbeat in this house still depended on me. Around midnight, my phone finally buzzed. One new voicemail. It was him. His voice was calm, too calm. "Sarah, it's me. Don't worry. I just need to clear my head for a bit. Tell Emma I love her. I'll be back soon." He sounded detached, like someone reciting lines. I replayed it a dozen times, trying to find meaning in his tone. Was he angry? Sad? Scared? It was like listening to a stranger using my husband's voice. The next day, I called the police. They took the report, asked all the standard questions. When did you last see him? What was he wearing? Any history of mental health issues, financial troubles, drugs, affairs? I said no to everything. But as I spoke, I realized how much I didn't know. When was the last time we really talked? When was the last time I saw him laugh, genuinely laugh. When was the last time he looked at me like he used to? The officer, a woman with tired eyes and a wedding band of her own, handed me a card and said they'd be in touch. Then she asked a question that froze me. Mrs. Miller, is there any reason your husband might not want to come home? I almost said no, but the words caught in my throat. Because suddenly, I remembered things. Small things. The late-night messages he'd hide when I walked into the room. The way he flinched when I touched his phone. The moments his face would go blank when I said I love you, like the phrase no longer fit. And then the way he looked at me last night. Not like a husband, not like a partner, but like someone trying to remember who I used to be. The officer's question still echoed in my head long after she left. Maybe he didn't leave to clear his head. Maybe he left because he couldn't stand the silence anymore. Or worse, maybe the silence had followed him. 6 days later, he still hadn't come home. By day 6, the police had already started to sound tired. When they called, their voices carried that rehearsed sympathy. The kind that came from people who'd done this before. We're still looking, Mrs. Miller, they'd say, as if I couldn't hear the doubt hiding beneath the words. They'd already searched the park, his office, the highway. Nothing. It was as if Mark had walked off the face of the earth, leaving only the echo of his absence behind. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Harris, came by again that morning. She was in her 40s, sharp eyes, wedding ring, the kind of woman who'd seen too many endings and no longer believed in neat resolutions. She stood in my kitchen, jotting notes, while I held Emma on my hip. So you're sure he didn't mention going anywhere? She asked. No, he talked the night before. It wasn't even a fight, just I hesitated. It was nothing, she repeated, as if tasting the word. But it upset him? I don't know, maybe. He seemed tired. She scribbled something down. And you? What about me? Were you tired too? The way she said it, calm, steady, a hint of accusation buried under politeness, made my stomach twist. Everyone's tired, I said. We have a 6-month-old. She gave me a thin smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, after she left, I realized how wrong it felt to have a stranger in my kitchen, examining my life like it was evidence. Every plate, every photograph, every speck of dust suddenly looked like something that could be used against me. I cleaned obsessively that day, wiping counters that were already spotless, folding laundry just to have something to do. But no amount of cleaning could wash away the thought that maybe, just maybe, they were looking at me differently now. That afternoon, Lauren came over. She didn't knock, just walked in with her sunglasses still on. The police called me, she said flatly. They said you were the last one to see him. Because I'm his wife, I replied, sharper than I meant to. Of course I was. She set her purse down and crossed her arms. Sarah, they asked me if he'd been unhappy. I looked at her, trying to read her face. And what did you say? I said no, she said, but her tone betrayed uncertainty. But now I'm thinking, was he? I laughed. But it came out wrong. He was tired. That's all. Tired enough to leave his daughter? She shot back. Tired enough to vanish? Her words hit like a slap. I wanted to tell her to get out, to stop looking at me like that, but instead, I said nothing. That night, after she left, I sat in Emma's room for hours. The soft hum of the baby monitor filled the silence, the same sound that used to comfort me. Now it felt like static in my chest. I thought about what the detective asked about being tired. I thought about how many nights Mark had stared at the wall instead of me. How many mornings he'd showered without saying a word. The distance had crept in quietly, disguised as routine. We stopped noticing when it arrived, so of course, we never noticed when it became unbearable. The next day, Detective Harris came back with a search warrant. Standard procedure, she said, voice calm but firm. We just need to rule things out. I stood frozen while 2 uniformed officers walked through my home, photographing everything. My chest tightened when they opened drawers, flipped through papers, handled objects that once belonged to him. His watch, his journal, the mug he used every morning. Harris noticed the ring sitting by the sink. You found this here? She asked. I nodded. Did he ever take it off before? Not that I remember. She looked at me for a long moment. Some men take it off before they leave. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Later, when they left, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt inspected, invaded, dissected. Every room carried their fingerprints, their assumptions. I picked up Emma and whispered, "It's okay, baby. It's just noise." But I didn't believe it. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the porch light flicker. My phone buzzed an unknown number. For a heartbeat, I thought it was him. But when I answered, it was Detective Harris. "Mrs. Miller, we found Mark's car." My throat tightened. "Where?" "Near Willow Creek, parked off the service road. Keys still inside." "Is he?" I couldn't finish. "No sign of him," she said. "No signs of struggle either." The next morning, I drove out there myself. The area was isolated, just dirt, trees, and silence. The car sat by itself, covered in a thin layer of dust. A half-empty water bottle in the cup holder. A jacket on the passenger seat. No blood, no broken glass, no clue. It was like he'd just parked, stepped out, and kept walking. I stood there for a long time, staring at that empty driver's seat. I could almost see him there, hands on the wheel, lost in thought. Then I imagined him getting out, closing the door quietly, and disappearing into the trees. Why there? Why? Like that? That night, when I came home, there was a message waiting in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting that looked like his. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank except for 5 words, written in blue ink. "You said you were tired too." I stared at it until the letters blurred. My pulse roared in my ears. I called the detective, but by the time they arrived, the letter was gone. I swore I'd left it on the counter. We tore through every drawer, every trash bag, but it wasn't there. Harris looked at me carefully, expression unreadable. "Are you sure it was real?" "Yes," I whispered, but my voice shook. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, holding Emma close, every creak of the house making me flinch. I didn't know if Mark was punishing me, or warning me, or asking for help. I just knew one thing. He wanted me to remember that moment. That stupid, ordinary sentence. "I'm tired too." By the end of that week, the town had already begun to talk. The missing husband, the quiet wife, the perfect suburban family that wasn't so perfect after all. At the grocery store, people looked at me differently, some with pity, others with suspicion. A woman I barely knew touched my arm and said, "You poor thing," in a tone that made me want to scream. At night, I replayed everything in my head, every conversation, every small argument, every sigh, every silence, trying to find the moment it all went wrong, trying to find the version of us that existed before fatigue turned into resentment. But no matter how far back I went, I kept landing on the same night, the same words, the same look in his eyes, and somewhere deep down, where the truth was waiting like a wound, I began to wonder if Mark hadn't disappeared at all. Maybe he'd just done what he'd been trying to do for months, finally walk away from me. By the second week, my face had started to show up on local news segments. "The missing husband case," they called it. They played our wedding photo, the one where Mark was smiling so wide it looked forced, and my eyes were turned slightly away from the camera. Everyone loved that image, the picture of happiness. I hated it. Detective Harris came again that Monday, this time with a different tone. More controlled, more distant. "We went through Mark's financials," she said, placing a folder on my kitchen counter. "You didn't know about the second account?" "What second account?" I asked. She slid the paper toward me. My hands hesitated before touching it. The account had been opened 6 months ago, right after Emma was born. Regular deposits, cash withdrawals every few weeks. "He said we were saving for the house," I murmured. "We were," she replied, "just not together." It didn't make sense. Mark wasn't reckless. He wasn't secretive. He was stable, predictable. The kind of man who double-checked receipts and folded his shirts the same way every time. But the detective's tone said otherwise. "Mrs. Miller," she said softly, "if there's something you haven't told us, I've told you everything." I cut her off. "Then you should know," she said. "He rented a storage unit out by Route 7. We'll be checking it tomorrow." That night, I couldn't breathe. The house felt too still, like it was listening. I kept hearing the baby monitor crackle static, then silence. I walked through the hall, stopping outside the door of Mark's office. I hadn't been inside since he vanished. The handle felt cold when I turned it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. His desk was neat, but one thing caught my eye. A camera on the shelf. Not his work one, but an old camcorder. The kind we used before Emma was born. I plugged it in, my hands shaking, and hit play. The first clip was from last Christmas. Laughter, wrapping paper, Mark holding Emma in front of the tree. Then another clip the same night, but filmed from a different angle, like someone had been recording us secretly. In the background, you could hear me saying, "She looks like you," and Mark laughing softly. "That's what I'm afraid of." The next file was dated 2 weeks before he disappeared. I pressed play. It was dark, the camera shaking slightly. He was in the garage whispering, "If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it." My breath caught. I can't say much. They're watching. The image glitched, freezing on his face, pale, exhausted, terrified. Then the video cut off. I stayed there for hours, replaying that fragment, over and over, trying to understand. Who was they? What did he mean by watching? The next morning, I went with the detectives to the storage unit. The place smelled of oil and concrete. Harris slid the door open. Inside were boxes, a few furniture pieces, and a suitcase. She crouched down and opened it. Inside were men's clothes, cash, a passport, but the name wasn't Mark Miller. It said Daniel Cole. My legs went weak. "That's not him," I said. But it was. The photo was Mark's. Same eyes, same jawline, same faint scar near his temple. Harris looked at me like she was waiting for the truth to slip out. "You didn't know?" I shook my head. "I swear I didn't. They took everything as evidence." When we got home, Harris stopped at the door. "Sarah," she said, voice softer now, "people lie to survive, sometimes even to the ones they love." That night, I sat on the floor of Emma's room, rocking her while she slept. My mind kept circling the same impossible question. Who had I married? The man who made pancakes on Sundays and read bedtime stories? Or the man who looked into a camera and said he was being watched? Around midnight, I heard a sound outside, a soft thud near the porch. I froze. My heart hammered as I grabbed my phone, creeping toward the door. Through the glass, I saw a small box sitting on the steps. No footsteps, no car sounds, just silence. Inside the box was a flash drive, unmarked. I plugged it into my laptop, hands trembling. There was one file, a video. It started with static, then slowly, an image came into focus. Mark again. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He was calm, smiling. "Sarah," he said, "you weren't supposed to find this. But if you did, you'll understand soon." He leaned closer to the camera. "Don't trust anyone. Not them, not Lauren, not even yourself." The screen went black. For a long time, I didn't move. My pulse thudded in my ears. Then, behind me, the baby monitor crackled again. A faint sound, not static this time. A voice, low, whispering, familiar. "Sarah." I turned toward the hallway. The morning after the flash drive arrived, I didn't sleep. My body moved, but my mind lagged somewhere between fear and disbelief. Mark's face was still burned into my thoughts, not the man in our wedding photos, but the one on that video. Calm, calculated, almost rehearsed. I called Lauren. She was the only person who might know something. She'd been Mark's coworker, his work friend, as he called her, but there was always something off in the way he said her name. Too casual, too often. "Lauren? It's Sarah." Silence on the other end, then a hesitant "Sarah. I heard about everything. I'm so sorry." Her tone was smooth, but guarded. "Did Mark ever mention someone named Daniel Cole?" The pause was long enough to confirm she knew. "Why?" "Because there's a passport with his picture and that name." Another pause. Then she said, "Maybe you should come over." Her apartment was cold and minimalist, filled with the scent of lemon candles. Lauren looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp. She poured coffee and sat across from me. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said quietly. "So you do know?" I asked. "I know enough to tell you to stop digging. He's my husband." "He was your husband," she corrected. "And if you really love Emma, you'll let this go." Her words hit like a slap. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," she whispered, leaning forward, "the man you married stopped being Mark Miller a long time ago." She wouldn't say more. I left her apartment shaking, my stomach twisted in knots. As I reached my car, I saw a black SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows, no plates. When I looked again, it was gone. That night, Detective Harris called. "We ran the name Daniel Cole," she said. "Turns out it's an alias connected to a federal investigation from years ago. We're talking fraud, identity theft, maybe worse." Your husband might have been involved. My throat tightened. No, I said. Mark's not Sarah. She interrupted gently. If he's alive, he's running from something big. Or someone. After I hung up, I sat in the dark with Emma asleep in my arms, staring at the tiny flash drive on the table. It felt like it was pulsing, alive. I plugged it in again. The same video started, but this time I noticed something, a reflection in the glass behind Mark. A faint, blurred figure. Watching him, I froze the frame, zoomed in. The outline looked like a woman's. Short hair. Maybe Lauren's height. My hands went cold. The next morning, I went back to Mark's office. I pulled out drawers, ripped open files, desperate for a clue. One folder was labeled Project Echo. Inside were printed emails, dated 2 years before we met. Client, L. Stone, payment confirmed, transfer completed. Each email was signed D. Qley. I scrolled back to the last video on the drive. Mark's last words echoed again. Don't trust Lauren. My breath caught. I drove straight to the police station, but Harris wasn't there. Instead, a younger officer told me she'd been reassigned. What do you mean, reassigned? I asked. Orders from above, he said. She's off your case. I left before he could ask more. Outside, I noticed the same black SUV parked near the corner again. This time, it didn't move when I stared. That night, I called Lauren again. No answer. I texted. We need to talk. I know about Project Echo. 10 minutes later, she replied. Stop. You're being watched. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Around a.m., I heard a noise from the kitchen. A soft click. I grabbed the nearest thing, a candle holder, and crept downstairs. The back door was open, wind blowing through the curtains. I flicked on the light. A paper lay on the floor. It was a photo Mark, standing beside a man I'd never seen, both wearing suits. The date on the back was from 5 years ago, long before we met. Scrawled in red pen beneath it, it was never about love. I sank to the floor, shaking, the world tilting around me. Everything, every smile, every promise, every sleepless night felt like part of a script I hadn't known I was in. By dawn, I had one thought pulsing through my mind. If Mark wasn't who he said he was, then who was I to him? And worse, what did he leave behind that someone was willing to kill to keep buried? By the following morning, I realized I couldn't wait for anyone to tell me the truth. The police were gone, Lauren had disappeared from my calls, and Detective Harris was reassigned, all leaving me alone with the faint hum of a house that suddenly felt hostile. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop again, scrutinizing every frame, every reflection, every shadow. That faint figure behind Mark in the last video kept replaying in my mind. Whoever it was, they had been present for every secret. My gut screamed that if I wanted answers, I would have to dig myself. I started with Mark's office. I pulled open every drawer, scanned every file, and rifled through his bookshelf, ignoring the neat arrangement he once insisted on. There it was, a small leather-bound notebook tucked behind law books, pages filled with names, dates, and coded notes I couldn't understand at first. But one pattern became clear: Project Echo. Every entry referenced it, connected to Daniel Cole, Lauren Stone, and a handful of other names I didn't recognize. I photographed every page, careful to leave nothing out. Next, I revisited the storage unit off Route 7. Alone this time, with the key tucked into my pocket, I opened the metal door. The boxes were the same, but I noticed a corner I hadn't examined before: a pile of old magazines with post-it notes sticking out, highlighting certain articles. They were news clippings about corporate fraud, disappearances, and financial scams. I realized Mark had been obsessively tracking all of it, and somehow, I'd been blind. The flash drive offered more clues. I cross-referenced the email addresses, names, and dates, piecing together that Mark's life as Daniel Cole had never truly ended. He'd hidden it behind his domestic persona, his predictable routines, even his role as a father. Every laugh, every breakfast, every bedtime story, carefully curated, but false. And yet, part of me couldn't help but remember the real Mark too, the man who had held me on sleepless nights, whispered "I love you" in the dark, and loved Emma with unshakable tenderness. The duality made my head spin. Lauren's warnings replayed in my mind. You're being watched. I took precautions. I installed cameras outside the house, checked locks obsessively, and avoided patterns. But every time I thought I was alone, I felt it. A presence, subtle, like a shadow moving just beyond the edge of perception. The black SUV appeared again, sometimes just parked across the street, sometimes gone when I looked back. Whoever was following us wanted me to know they were there, without revealing themselves completely. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. No voice, just breathing. I hung up, heart pounding. Minutes later, another call, the same pattern. Then a text. Stop or you'll regret it. I knew then I was too deep. I couldn't back out. I had to see this through. I began tracing Mark's contacts. Email trails, phone numbers, banking records, all pointing to different identities. Daniel Qley wasn't just an alias. He was a network. I discovered offshore accounts, untraceable transfers, and multiple passports. Someone had invested years in covering this life. And suddenly I understood. He hadn't disappeared randomly. He was hiding something or being hunted. I returned to the house that night, laptop in hand, Emma asleep in the crib. The front door clicked open quietly. My heart leapt. I spun around, ready to confront, but it was empty. Nothing moved. A folded piece of paper lay on the counter. In Daniel Qley's neat handwriting, trust no one, even me. I sank into a chair, realizing the full weight of what I'd discovered. Everything I'd known, everything I'd loved, had been a fraud. Even Mark's love had been a performance layered with deception. The shock was paralyzing, but anger quickly replaced it. How dare he play me like this? How dare he leave me to untangle a life I never agreed to be part of? The next morning, I rented a car and drove to the outskirts of town, following addresses from the storage unit and the flash drive. Small towns, back roads, abandoned warehouses, each stop offering tiny fragments, receipts, surveillance footage, partial clues. Everywhere I went, I felt watched, recorded, studied. Whoever Daniel Qley was, he had contingencies, plans, fail-safes, and now, I was in the middle of them. A diner in a sleepy town. I met a man who recognized Mark not as my husband, but as Daniel Qley. He was careful with words, nervous, eyes darting. You don't know what you're messing with, he warned, sliding a napkin across the table. On it, an address and a time, 10:00 p.m. Willow Creek storage lot. If you go there, be ready for the truth and don't expect to like it. Driving back, adrenaline thrummed through my veins. Part of me wanted to run, hide, and pretend ignorance. But the other part, the part that held Emma, that had been betrayed and lied to, refused. I wouldn't stop. Not until I understood why the man I married had constructed a life within a life, and why it had left me so alone, so exposed, and so terrified. By the time I arrived at Willow Creek that night, the air was thick with fog. Shadows stretched across the gravel lot. The storage units stood like silent sentinels. Somewhere in the darkness, Daniel Qley's world awaited me, dangerous, unpredictable, and entirely unlike the suburban marriage I thought I knew. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about Mark. It was about me, and what I was willing to risk to uncover the truth. The night air bit through my coat as I parked the rental car a few hundred feet from the Willow Creek storage lot. Fog rolled across the gravel, swallowing the dull yellow lights that flickered above the rows of metal doors. My stomach churned with anticipation and fear. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to go back home and pretend ignorance. But I couldn't, not anymore. I had to see it, had to know what Mark had hidden all these years, and why it had left me trapped in a life that wasn't real. I pulled the key from my pocket and approached the unit. The lock clicked open, echoing louder than it should have in the quiet night. Inside, the air smelled of dust, mildew, and something faintly chemical. I ran my fingers over the boxes, scanning labels, files, accounts, operations, and then one labeled confidential, do not open. My hand shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were folders, manila envelopes, and binders filled with handwriting I recognized immediately. Mark's, Daniel Qley's. I opened the first folder. Bank statements, falsified IDs, forged signatures, offshore accounts, everything pointed to a life built on lies, theft, and manipulation. Every detail I had missed, every small deception in our marriage, suddenly fit into this massive, meticulous puzzle. My head spun. How had I never suspected? How could someone I had loved with every fiber of my being orchestrate a life so carefully hidden? I flipped through another binder. Emails, photographs, and handwritten notes detailing transactions, people, and places I had never heard of. And then I saw it. A photograph of a man I didn't recognize, shaking hands with Mark, in front of a sleek office building downtown. Behind them, in the glass reflection, was another man, someone watching, recording. My pulse quickened. Whoever Mark had been involved with was dangerous. Suddenly, a sound behind me made me jump. A floorboard creaked. I spun around, heart hammering, but the unit was empty. Shadows stretched across the walls as the single overhead bulb flickered. I told myself it was just nerves, just the fog, just my imagination. But then I noticed a folder lying slightly apart from the rest, labeled simply, Sarah. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs me, Emma Mark, taken at home, in our yard, even at the grocery store. Dates and times scrawled beneath them. Someone had been watching us. Someone had known me better than I knew myself. I dropped to my knees, staring at the photos, feeling sick and exposed. And then I saw a videotape at the bottom of the folder. The label read, "For Sarah when the time comes." My fingers shook as I inserted it into the old VHS player I'd found in the corner. The screen flickered, then came alive with the image of Mark. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He was serious, almost menacing. He looked directly at me through the grainy tape. "Sarah," he said, voice calm, precise. "If you're seeing this, it means you've gone too far. Everything you thought you knew is gone. I did what I had to do. For you. For Emma, for me. But there are people who will come for you if they think you've uncovered too much. Trust no one. Even your own instincts may betray you." My heart raced. His eyes flickered with something. I couldn't place regret, fear, or calculation. The tape ended, leaving the room in darkness save for the faint glow of the overhead light. I felt a cold sweat on my skin. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to never come back. But another voice, deep inside, whispered that I couldn't. Not after all this. I needed answers. I needed to understand. I had to face the man I had married, the man who had built this labyrinth of deception and somehow survive it. I gathered the folders, the photographs, the tapes, and stuffed them into my backpack. Every sound outside the unit made me jump, a snapping branch, the hum of a distant car, the whisper of wind. But I moved quietly, deliberately, each step measured. When I reached the car, I paused and looked back at the unit, the place that held the truth, and yet had almost swallowed me alive. Back at my apartment, I spread the contents across the dining table. I studied the documents, the photos, and the videos for hours, piecing together what I could. Every lie, every hidden identity, every clandestine meeting formed a pattern. Daniel Qley had been planning, hiding, and manipulating for years, and now somehow, I was part of it. My mind raced with the possibilities. Why the videos for me? Why the photographs? Was he trying to warn me? Or was it another layer of control? Hours passed, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of panic and clarity. Somewhere in all this, the truth had to exist. Somewhere, hidden behind Daniel Qley's meticulous plans and Mark's charm, was a reason, a motive, a goal, a justification. And I realized I would have to confront it, no matter the cost. Emma stirred in her crib, a soft gurgle breaking the silence. I looked at her and felt the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical force. I wasn't just entangling Mark's secrets for me. I was doing it for her, to protect her from the man her father had really been. The man he had hidden behind the mask of her loving dad. And as dawn approached, washing the room in pale gray light, I made a decision. I would follow the trail, piece by piece, step by step, no matter how dangerous. Because the truth about Mark Daniel Qley was out there. And I wasn't leaving him or the truth behind. The fog was thick that evening as I drove toward the address scribbled on the napkin Lauren had given me. Every mile, my heart pounded faster. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the black SUV from before lurking, watching. But the street was empty, silent, the kind of silence that made your ears ring. I parked a block away and approached on foot, hugging my coat tightly against the chill. The building was abandoned, a warehouse, windows boarded up, rust crawling across the metal doors. I slipped inside through a side entrance Lauren had circled in her notes, and my flashlight barely pierced the darkness. The air smelled of oil, mildew, and something else, fear, almost tangible. I scanned the room, crates stacked against the walls, dusty furniture, and in the center, a small desk with papers spread across it. I moved closer, careful to step softly. On the desk were folders labeled with names, dates, and a few photographs. My eyes widened as I recognized Mark Daniel Qley in several of them, in meetings I hadn't known about, shaking hands with men whose faces were stern, dangerous. And then I saw a name repeated several times, Stone. Lauren Stone. The same woman who had tried to warn me. I realized she wasn't just involved, she was a player. A participant in the network Daniel Cole had built. A sudden sound, a soft creak behind me made me spin. Nothing, just the shadows stretching across the walls. I tried to steady my breathing, but every nerve in my body screamed. I rifled through the desk and found a folder labeled Contingencies Sarah Miller. My hands shook. Inside, photographs of me and Emma, notes detailing my routines, habits, and the times I was most vulnerable. Whoever Daniel Cole was, he had been watching me long before I ever realized it. I heard a low hum behind me. My flashlight caught movement, a figure stepping from the shadows. Lauren. She didn't raise her hands. Sarah, she said quietly, almost regretfully. You shouldn't be here. I took a step back. Why? Why all of this? Why was Mark? Why Daniel Cole? Her eyes darted nervously. You don't understand. You're in the middle of something bigger than your marriage. He's dangerous. And so are the people he owes, the people he betrayed. Lauren took a step closer, voice trembling. He's not the man you loved anymore. He's a survivalist. He built a life out of manipulation, control, and secrets. And he planned for every possibility, including you finding this. My pulse raced. You knew all this? I knew pieces, she admitted. Enough to warn you. But I never expected you'd go this far. Suddenly, the warehouse door banged. Someone outside. Footsteps approaching. I froze. Lauren grabbed my arm. We don't have much time. You need to see this. She led me to a corner where a small safe had been hidden behind crates. Inside were passports, cash, and documents. A ledger detailing Project Echo's operations. Identities changed, assets moved, people tracked, debts collected. And then a folder marked the endgame. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were notes, photographs, and a series of instructions, addresses, times, and meetings, all pointing to a final location. And then a photo I couldn't believe. Mark holding a child. Not Emma, another child. Dated recently. My heart sank. He had hidden another life entirely. Another secret family. And now, every assumption I had about our life together, every memory, felt like a lie. Footsteps grew louder. Someone was inside. I grabbed the folder and Lauren grabbed my arm again. We need to go, now. We slipped out a back exit, the fog swallowing us as we ran. I felt my heart hammering, my legs trembling. But underneath the fear, a fire burned. I couldn't let him manipulate me any longer. I had to follow the thread, uncover the truth, and protect Emma. No matter what it took. That night, back in my apartment, I spread the documents across the dining table. Every detail, every name, every location. A map of deception and danger. I realized then that the man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was a master of secrets and shadows. But I wasn't powerless. I would track him, understand him, and uncover every hidden truth. And somewhere in the darkness, I knew the next step would be the most dangerous yet. The first time I saw him again, it was nothing like I imagined. I expected confrontation, shouting, or perhaps some desperate plea. Instead, he appeared calm, unnervingly calm, as if he had anticipated this moment all along. The warehouse was dimly lit, only a single overhead bulb casting harsh shadows. He stood there, Daniel Cole, Mark Miller, a man of many faces. One identity carefully stripped away in the years he had hidden from the world. I froze for a second, clutching the folder I had taken from Project Echo. Emma was safe at a neighbor's house, I'd made sure of that. But my hands shook, and my chest felt tight. His eyes met mine, steady, calculating, and piercing in a way that made every instinct in my body scream to run. Sarah, he said softly, his voice the same but altered, warmer, familiar, and yet, carrying an edge I couldn't place. I wondered when this day would come. I swallowed hard. Why all of this? All the lies, the secrets, the other life. You left me in the dark. You left her in the dark. I nodded toward the folder in my hands. He took a slow step forward, hands visible, nothing threatening, but every movement deliberate. I did it to protect you, to protect Emma, to protect myself. You think you know who I am, but none of it is simple. I laughed, though it came out hollow. Protect me? By lying? By hiding a whole other child? By making me the pawn in your game? My voice cracked. The rage inside me surged. mixing with the fear that had settled in my chest for weeks. He sighed, almost pityingly. Game is such a harsh word. Life is survival. Choices are messy. I made the decisions I thought necessary. You think keeping secrets is necessary? I demanded. You think disappearing for days, leaving me alone with a baby, is acceptable? He studied me for a moment. Then his tone shifted, sharper, more precise. I needed to vanish, Sarah, because there are people, dangerous people, who want what I know, what I hold, what Project Echo entails. If I stayed, you would have been in their crosshairs. Emma would have been. I swallowed, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Then why the videos? Why the photographs? Why leave me hints if it's about protection? He tilted his head, expression unreadable. Because I had to make sure you'd survive, that you'd know what to do, that you'd follow the thread and not fall into the wrong hands. I taught you to think, Sarah, even in my absence. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Everything was true, and yet, it felt like a trap. My eyes narrowed. And what about Lauren? She's part of this? He hesitated, the first crack in his calm exterior. Lauren, she was never meant to be your enemy. She was my ally, a safeguard. Someone I trusted to guide you if I couldn't. I took a step closer, adrenaline coursing through me. So all of this, the lies, the hidden accounts, the other child, the watching, it's just training, preparation? He nodded slightly. You're stronger than you realize. You had to discover the truth yourself, follow the clues. That's how you'll survive the rest. Project Echo isn't just a name. It's a network, a mechanism. And now, Sarah, you're part of it whether you like it or not. I stared at him, heart hammering, mind spinning. Part of me wanted to run, to scream, to throw everything at him. But another part, the part that had fought through weeks of lies, secrets, and shadows, knew I couldn't. I had to hear more. I had to understand the man I had loved, the man I had raised Emma with, and the man who had become Daniel Cole. He took a step back, hands raising slightly, a gesture of surrender. I didn't want it to come to this, he said softly. But you found it all. And now, there's no going back. The truth is yours to hold, and what you do with it will determine everything. I swallowed hard, gripping the folder tightly. Then tell me everything, right now. No more lies, no more secrets. I deserve that much for Emma, and for me. He looked at me, a faint smile playing across his lips. All right, Sarah, you want the truth? You'll get it. But once you know, there's no undoing it. Are you ready? I nodded, though a part of me quivered. I'm ready. And in that dim warehouse, the final layer began to unfold. The full, terrifying, intricate truth about Daniel Cole, Mark Miller, Project Echo, and the life I had thought I knew. Mark Daniel Cole finally spoke. His voice calm, but carrying the weight of years spent hiding, lying, and surviving. Project Echo isn't just a name, Sarah, he began. It's a system, a network, a safeguard, and it's bigger than any one person, including me. I clutched the folder, trying to absorb every word, every gesture. My mind raced. You mean, all the lies, the other identity, the hidden accounts, the videos, it was all part of this system? He nodded slowly. Yes, every step I took was calculated. Every secret I kept was necessary to maintain balance, to keep you and Emma safe. There are people, Sarah, powerful, dangerous, who would stop at nothing to get what I know, what I control. And if they found me through you, they would destroy everything. I shook my head. But the other child, the photographs, why hide that? Why make me fear you? His eyes darkened, and for the first time I saw the man behind the mask, the man who had sacrificed, manipulated, and lied out of desperation. That wasn't your child, he said. It was a decoy, a necessary illusion to keep me alive, to protect you from being traced. I needed you to think I had another life, so my enemies would underestimate me, underestimate you. I felt nausea rise. You used me all this time. I was just a pawn? No, he said sharply. You were never a pawn. You were my responsibility. Everything I did was to ensure your survival. But yes, you were unaware. That's the point. Ignorance is protection in this game. I sank into a chair, trying to process the revelation. And Lauren? Why involve her? She was the only person I could trust to guide you if I couldn't, to monitor, to protect, to nudge you in the right direction. Everything you discovered, the photographs, the videos, the flash drive, it was all staged for you to follow the trail, To learn, to survive, to act. My hands trembled. And the network? The people watching me? The threats? They're real, he admitted. I can't control everyone. Some are enemies. I can't see, can't influence. That's why you had to follow the clues yourself. That's why Project Echo exists, to outmaneuver threats, to protect assets, information, and people. His voice softened. Including you and Emma. I looked at him, fury and fear colliding. You left me alone for weeks, knowing how scared I would be, knowing how vulnerable I was. He flinched, just slightly. I didn't leave you. I couldn't stay without exposing us both. You had to find strength you didn't know you had. And you did. That's why you're still here, Sarah. That's why Emma is safe. I stared at him, heart hammering. Everything I had felt, betrayal, anger, fear, swirled into one. I realized the man I had loved, the father of my child, the husband I thought I knew, was gone. In his place was Daniel Qley, strategist, manipulator, survivor. And yet, beneath it all, there was still a trace of the man I married. Now, he said, leaning closer, intensity in his gaze, you have a choice. You can walk away and pretend none of this exists. Or you can step fully into it, understand Project Echo, learn how it works, and use it. Because the moment you walk away, you and Emma are vulnerable. And I can't protect you anymore. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. My mind raced through weeks of fear, investigation, and discovery. I thought about Emma, about the life I wanted to protect for her. And for the first time, I realized that survival didn't just mean hiding or avoiding danger. It meant confronting it fully, strategically, and without illusions. I looked at him, calm but resolute. Then teach me. I don't care what it takes. I want to understand everything, so we can protect Emma, so I can survive, so we can survive. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good, you're ready. But be warned, Sarah, once you know, there's no turning back. Project Echo is unforgiving, and the truth is dangerous. But if we play it right, we might just stay alive. And in that warehouse, with the night pressing against the walls and shadows dancing around us, the full picture began to unfold. The man I had loved, the man I had feared, the man who was both Mark Miller and Daniel Qley, was finally showing me the path forward, a path that would test every instinct, every nerve, and every ounce of courage I had. The next few days blurred into one long, restless night. After Mark Daniel unraveled the truth of Project Echo, I found myself staring at a chessboard of dangers, with pieces I barely understood. But if I was going to protect Emma, I couldn't just stand on the sidelines anymore. I had to learn. I had to adapt. He began with the basics. Not weapons, not violence, information. Power isn't about guns or fists, he told me one evening in a safe house on the outskirts of the city. It's about knowing where people will be before they arrive. It's about predicting moves and cutting off options before they can use them. We sat in a dimly lit room, papers spread across the table, maps with pins marking locations, names circled in red. Every so often, Mark glanced at his encrypted laptop, eyes scanning streams of coded messages that meant nothing to me. He pointed to names and photos. These are the operatives who were tracking us. Some are freelancers, some are paid by syndicates, all of them dangerous. But they're not the worst part. I leaned in, heart pounding. What's the worst part? He looked at me, his eyes dark and unflinching. The worst part is they don't just come for you. They manipulate. They plant stories. They ruin reputations, burn lives. They'll make you look like the villain before they even touch you. A chill crept up my spine. So what do we do? He slid a folder across the table. Inside were schedules, coded phrases, a burner phone, and an address written in careful script. You're going to shadow me, quietly. Learn how I move, how I anticipate. You'll see how information flows, how to use it. Because if anything happens to me, you'll have to carry it on. I stared at the folder, then at him. You're really preparing me for your death? He didn't answer immediately. I'm preparing you for survival. Don't mistake the two. That night, I followed him for the first time. We moved like ghosts, slipping through alleyways and side streets, blending into crowds. Mark taught me how to spot surveillance, subtle movements, repeated faces, cars parked just a little too long. He showed me how to leave misleading trails, switching taxis, doubling back, using reflections in windows to catch tails. My heart raced, my hands clammy, but under the fear was a strange clarity. The city became a living map, and for the first time, I understood how small details could mean the difference between freedom and being caught. Later, in a quiet diner at the edge of town, he opened up another layer. Project Echo wasn't built to harm. It was built to outmaneuver harm, to create safe corridors for people who can't disappear on their own. But I corrupted it. I used it to survive. And in doing so, I put you at risk. I sipped my coffee, trying to steady my nerves. So now what? We just run forever? He shook his head. Running only works for so long. At some point, you have to stand your ground. The words hung between us. I realized then that Mark wasn't just teaching me to survive. He was training me to fight back. Back at the safe house, Emma slept in a back room under the watchful eye of a retired operative Mark trusted. I watched her chest rise and fall, her tiny fingers curled around a stuffed animal. A wave of determination surged through me. Whatever this network was, whatever danger it held, I would not let it touch her. Mark appeared in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the dim light. "You're learning fast," he said. Faster than I expected. I met his gaze. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for her." He nodded once, almost approvingly. "Good, because you're going to have to make decisions soon. Hard ones. Ones I can't make for you." The next morning, a message arrived on the encrypted phone he'd given me. Just one line: "They're closing in." Mark's face hardened. He grabbed his bag, tossing me another. "We have to move, now." As we slipped out into the gray dawn, I realized I had crossed an invisible line. I was no longer just a wife, no longer just a mother trying to make sense of a vanished husband. I was part of something larger, something dangerous, and the only way out was through. And deep down, beneath the fear and exhaustion, I felt something else growing inside me. Not just resolve, not just anger, but a kind of instinct I hadn't known I possessed, an instinct to survive, to outhink, to outmaneuver. Mark glanced at me as we climbed into a waiting car. "You're ready," he said softly. "You just don't know it yet." I stared out the window as the city blurred past, my reflection staring back at me harder, sharper, no longer the woman who had once simply said, "Oh, me too," to a tired husband. That woman was gone, and in her place was someone else. Someone who had begun to learn the game. The car slowed as Mark guided me down a side street. My hands gripped the seat, adrenaline hammering in my chest. The message had been clear: they're closing in. I didn't know who they were exactly, only that whoever it was had resources, surveillance. And no hesitation, Mark parked in the shadow of a narrow alley. "We wait here," he whispered. "Watch, observe, learn. The first test is about patience and perception." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Every instinct screamed at me to panic, to bolt, to run, but I remembered what he had taught me: attention to detail, patience, anticipation. I scanned the street. 2 black SUVs lingered across the road, tinted windows glinting in the dim streetlight. Footsteps echoed, purposeful, steady. They weren't amateurs. Mark handed me binoculars. "Count them. Watch their patterns. Look for the signs." I squinted, tracking movement. One SUV's doors opened. 2 men in dark jackets stepped out, splitting up. I noticed the way one of them repeatedly glanced at reflections in shop windows, checking for tails. The other circled the block, phone in hand, seemingly communicating. "They're professionals," I whispered. Mark nodded. "And now, you decide our next move." Everything we've practiced leads to this moment. I remembered the decoys, the fake trails, the switching taxis, the subtle signals he had taught me. Slowly, deliberately, I took my phone and sent a prearranged signal, a fake GPS ping showing our location to blocks east. I held my breath as I watched the SUVs react. Both men immediately moved toward the false location. Mark's eyes flickered with approval. "Good, quick thinking. Now, the real exit." I led him down a hidden service alley, using shadows and blind spots we had scouted earlier. The SUVs overshot us. My pulse raced, but I kept moving, silent and precise. For the first time, I felt the power of knowledge, of information used strategically. We reached a side street, barely a block away from the safe house. Mark exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. "You did well. They underestimated you. That's the difference between survival and failure." I felt a surge of confidence, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. "How many more are coming?" I asked, breathless. Mark shook his head. "Too many to count. Project Echo has enemies at every level." But now you're no longer blind. You can anticipate. You can act. You can protect Emma. And that's what matters. Back at the safe house, I locked the door behind us and checked the security feeds. The SUVs had returned to patrol the surrounding blocks. Whoever they were, they knew we were active, moving, learning. But for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I glanced at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her crib. A fierce determination settled in my chest. I would fight for her. I would outhink them. I would survive. Mark studied me quietly. "You've changed," he said softly. "The woman who followed clues and feared shadows is gone. This is someone else now. Someone ready for the next step." I nodded. I wasn't just learning to survive anymore. I was learning to fight, to anticipate, to take control. The real test was only beginning. Outside, the fog settled over the city, swallowing streets and alleys. Shadows moved, watching, waiting. And in the quiet darkness, I felt a strange, dangerous exhilaration. The knowledge that I could face them, and perhaps, just perhaps, come out alive. Dawn broke over the city, but the light did nothing to ease the tension that hung in the air. Sarah sat at the edge of the safe house window, Emma sleeping quietly in the next room. Her hands shook slightly as she reviewed the folders and maps she had memorized over the past days. Every name, every location, every photograph represented a thread she had to follow or risk losing control entirely. Mark stood behind her, silent, watching. "The past few days were just an introduction," he said quietly. "Now the stakes rise. They know we're active. They're moving faster, smarter. You have to anticipate before they act." I swallowed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down. "How many are we talking about?" He shook his head. "Too many. Project Echo has enemies at every level: rogue operatives, criminal syndicates, even some we once considered allies. They've been waiting, observing, and now, they sense a vulnerability. They think Emma and you are exposed." My stomach churned. "So what do we do?" Mark gestured toward a map pinned with red dots. "We create layers, decoys, false patterns, unpredictable movements. You learned observation and anticipation. Now you'll learn action. Every move counts. Every misstep can cost lives." I studied the map carefully, memorizing routes, escape points, and patterns. I realized the gravity of what I had taken on. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was strategy, precision, and foresight. Hours passed as we ran simulations, movement drills, surveillance spotting, coded communications. Mark pushed me harder than ever before, correcting mistakes, showing blind spots. Each lesson was intense, exhausting, and terrifying. And yet, beneath the fear, I felt a rising confidence. I was no longer helpless. I could read shadows, anticipate threats, and make decisions in seconds that could protect both Emma and myself. Late afternoon, a coded message appeared on the encrypted phone Mark had given me. I decoded it quickly, heart hammering. "They've found your location. Initiate countermeasures. Move now." Mark's face was hard. "Time to test your skills in the field. You've learned the theory. Now you apply it." I nodded, grabbing the essentials: the folder, the encrypted phone, a small backpack. Emma was safely secured in a portable carrier, hidden beneath layers. Mark handed me a sidearm. "Not for aggression," he said. "For protection only. Remember, control, calm, calculation." We slipped out the back, into the foggy streets. Shadows moved around us, every reflection, every silhouette potentially a threat. I felt the adrenaline surge, fear mixing with determination. Every lesson from the past days became instinct, observation, anticipation, decoy creation, silent movement. By nightfall, we reached a rendezvous point outside the city, an abandoned industrial area Mark had previously used as a safe zone. Surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and false trails were in place. I checked everything meticulously, every detail scrutinized. Mark nodded once. "Good, you've passed the first part. But now, Sarah, the real challenge begins. They know we're alive. They know we're moving. And they're coming for us. The next steps will test every skill, every nerve, every decision you've made. Are you ready?" I inhaled, glancing at Emma asleep in the carrier. "I don't have a choice," I said. "But yes, I'm ready." Outside, fog swallowed the streets. Shadows lurked, watching, waiting. And in the quiet, I felt the weight of the game pressing down, the knowledge that every move, every breath, could tip the balance between life and death. But for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was prepared to fight, and the war for Emma's safety and the truth behind Project Echo had officially begun. Toot vi pan for BSL Kauder OHNH Engvuter. Ki Sarah Phi PDGTDC Nachi GGHCC IPH strict tip vi K Thang Ro Rit Trui L Eng CV Emma. Mc Truen VNGI Psychological Thriller QM. Siang Thang, TC Cow, NANN Manuter V Sich Tien. The fog had thickened over the city, turning streetlights into blurred halos. I moved silently, Emma strapped securely in the carrier against my chest. Every sense was alert, every sound, every shadow could signal danger. Mark followed close behind, silent, vigilant. The encrypted phone buzzed a warning. They've intercepted a decoy. They're adjusting. Change course immediately. I took a deep breath, heart hammering, and memorized the alternate route Mark had shown me earlier. Step by step, I applied what I had learned, watching for reflections, noting repeated movements, checking street corners, and constantly shifting our path to confuse any tail. As we turned down a narrow alley, I noticed movement in the shadows to figures emerging from the fog. They were dressed in black, their posture professional, deliberate. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to remain calm. Stay close to me, Mark whispered. I nodded, gripping Emma tighter. Every lesson from the past week flooded my mind: decoys, misdirection, silent signals. I scanned the alley, spotted a fire escape ladder, a side door partially ajar, and a trash bin positioned perfectly to block a line of sight. They're professionals, I whispered to myself, voice barely audible. Mark gestured, and we split a planned maneuver I had memorized. I darted to the fire escape while he drew attention down the alley. My heart raced as I climbed, careful not to make noise. Above, the rooftop led to a network of pipes and walkways I had studied in the floor plans. I moved swiftly, anticipating their reactions. The two figures reached the alley and paused, confused. One spoke into a radio, their voice low but tense. I kept moving, silent, strategic. For the first time, I felt the full weight of knowledge as power. Every observation, every calculated move allowed me to stay one step ahead. We regrouped on the rooftop. Mark handed me a small tracking device. Plant this near the building ahead. It will give us their movements. Timing is everything. I approached the edge, careful not to be seen. The device clicked into place, sending a pulse back to our encrypted feed. Through the monitor, we watched the figures below. They moved cautiously, unaware of our vantage point. Good, Mark said quietly. Now we anticipate. Let them make the next move. We control the outcome. Minutes felt like hours. My pulse raced with every shift of the shadowed figures below. Then, one moved away from the others, triggered by a false clue we had planted. I signaled Mark. He nodded. It was time. We descended silently from the rooftop, emerging from a side street. They weren't monitoring. The fog concealed us. Every muscle tensed, every sense heightened. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just following instructions anymore. I was thinking, adapting, predicting. I was controlling the game. Hours later, back at a temporary safe house, I collapsed into a chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Emma slept peacefully, unaware of the danger that had brushed so close. Mark studied me, a hint of pride in his eyes. You did well, he said softly. Better than I expected. You're no longer just learning. You're applying, anticipating, surviving. I looked at him, voice tired but firm. We're not safe yet. They'll come again. Stronger, smarter. We have to be ready. Mark nodded. Yes, and the next move will test you even more. This isn't just survival, it's strategy, deception, and endurance. Every decision could be life or death. Outside, the fog swirled around the city streets. Shadows moved in the distance, watching, waiting. But I felt different now. I was no longer just reacting. I was calculating, anticipating, preparing. I had learned the rules of the game, and I had begun to master them, and deep down, I knew the next confrontation would be the most dangerous yet, but I would face it, and I would protect Emma, no matter the cost. Night had swallowed the city, the fog turning streetlights into halos of uncertainty. I gripped Emma tightly in the carrier, every sense alert. Mark had led us to the edge of the industrial district, the area the encrypted messages indicated as the rendezvous for the enemy operatives. They know we're coming, Mark whispered, scanning the surroundings. This is it. Every skill you've learned will be tested tonight. I nodded, heart pounding. The streets were eerily silent, but I could feel the tension in the shadows. The operatives were close. Mark handed me the encrypted phone and whispered instructions: plant decoys, monitor their movements, and signal if they attempted to flank us. I followed meticulously, placing sensors and markers, each motion precise. Every lesson from the past week's stealth, anticipation, observation came to life in the foggy streets. Then I saw them, 5 figures, moving with purpose, scanning the area. One turned sharply, noticing the decoy I had set. I signaled to Mark. He nodded, and we moved silently along the rooftops, adjusting our route as the enemy followed the false trail. A sudden noise, a metal clang, echoed below. My heart jumped, but I remained calm, remembering Mark's training. Fear is a tool, not a chain. The operatives split, trying to corner us. I signaled Mark, and we enacted a coordinated move, leading them into a trap we had set. Motion sensors triggered, lights flashed, and the operatives paused, disoriented. I realized in that moment, we had the advantage. They were reacting to our strategy, not controlling it. I descended quietly behind a chain link fence, guiding Emma through the shadows. The operatives regrouped, frustrated, and began to communicate via radios. I listened carefully, noting their patterns, predicting their next move. Mark caught my eye. "You're ready. This is your moment." I nodded. For the first time, I felt the full weight of control. We were no longer fleeing blindly. We were directing the game, forcing them to respond to us. Every move was calculated, every decision deliberate. By the time we reached a secondary safe house, the operatives were left confused, chasing false leads. I collapsed into a chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Emma was asleep, safe, and for the first time in days, I felt a surge of confidence. Dawn crept over the city, the fog lifting to reveal quiet streets. Inside the safe house, I spread out the final set of documents we had recovered from Project Echo. Mark sat across from me, silent but observant. "We've neutralized the immediate threat," he said quietly. "For now, they won't follow us. But the network is vast. Project Echo isn't over." I looked at Emma, sleeping soundly. "I don't care about the network anymore. I care about her." "About us?" Mark nodded. "And that's why you survived. You focused, adapted, and protected. That's what matters." We reviewed the folders one last time, planning long-term strategies, safe routes, and contingencies. I realized then that I wasn't the same person who had blindly trusted, who had once been passive in the shadows. I had become calculated, aware, and resilient. A strategist in my own right. "You've done well," Mark said almost softly. "More than I could have hoped. You're no longer just part of the game, you can direct it." I smiled faintly, exhaustion and relief mingling. "The game's not over," I said, "but now, I know how to play. And I'll protect Emma, no matter what comes next." Outside, the city slowly came to life. Shadows receded, but the lessons remained. The threats of Project Echo would never vanish completely, but I had learned to survive, to anticipate, and to fight, and I would never be powerless again. And as sunlight broke through the fog, I realized survival wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about mastering it and claiming control of our lives, one step at a time.